Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for being here for tonight's event, Rights and Resources, an online community program, presented in partnership with Hanul Family Alliance and North Suburban Legal Aid Clinic. My name is Tracy Karim, and I'm the ESL and Literacy Services Coordinator here at Arlington Heights Memorial Library. Our office serves adult learners in our community who are developing their language and literacy skills. I'm joined tonight by additional library staff working behind the scenes. We're so thankful that you took the time to join us for this important and timely presentation. I'm thrilled to introduce tonight's guests. We have Dylan Robinson, Community Engagement Coordinator with Hanul Family Alliance, and Ken Willer, Supervising Attorney, Immigration Law Practice with North Suburban Legal Aid Clinic. So to start us off this evening, we'll hear from Dylan with Hanul Family Alliance.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much, Tracy, for the wonderful introduction. And I'm really happy to be here with Ken, being supported by Hanul's immigration manager, Elaine, and the rest of the Arlington Heights Library staff. As Tracy mentioned, I work at Hanul Family Alliance. We are an ICER member, and we are part of their New Americans initiative to help people with citizenship and DACA. And we also assist with IDHS. A little bit about us. We are a social service agency based in Chicago and North Chicago and Lake County, and we take pride in our mission to enhance the lives of individuals and families through a comprehensive range of services and programs where compassionate care meets a commitment to community well-being. And one of our programs or departments is immigration. So part of what they do is process different applications, including for green cards and DACA, adjustment of status, and other applications. We offer scholarships as well if you apply for DACA renewal or citizenship. And we also offer citizenship classes that are once a week for 10 weeks and are offered on a quarterly basis. So to start off, I want to make this very clear. So everyone in the United States is guaranteed these rights regardless of immigration status. And these rights include the right to deny law enforcement entry into your home without a judicial warrant. You have the right to remain silent. This is important because anything you say can be used against you. And if you have a Know Your Rights card, you can use it. You have the right to speak with and be represented by an attorney in court. And this is something that you will have to find yourself. There are lots of pro bono lawyers that are available. Um, you have the right to refuse to sign any documents, and you have the right to appeal your case in court under certain circumstances. And this won't cover all the circumstances, but there might be cases where you're not able to appeal. So there have been lots of concerns about what kinds or like how to identify immigration enforcement and how to distinguish them from Chicago police. So a good way to identify them is through their badge. So Chicago police have this silver badge with a star, and that clearly says police officer, Chicago police, with the city of Chicago seal and immigration enforcement under the U.S. Department of Homeland Security, which includes ICE, Customs and Border Patrol, and USCIS, and Homeland Security will have a gold shield with an eagle on top, and then they have the DHS signal on it. And going into their uniforms, Chicago police often wear uniforms with their name and badge visible and will say Chicago police, whereas many ICE agents and immigration enforcement officers will conceal their identity. They will be wearing masks and they will cover their badges, such as shown in this photo. And some of them may even wear more militarized gear, um, and will deliberately hide their any indication of what agency they're from. That's why it's really important to ask, and this is a right that you have. You can and should ask law enforcement officers to clarify whether they are from a local police department or if they're immigration, because as you can see on their vest, it does say police, but they are not police officers. They're conducting immigration work. So during ICE encounters, it's really important to avoid these actions. Do not run away. It will draw suspicion and they may be able to detain you. Do not fight or resist against officers because you can be hurt this way. Do not carry false documents or lie because that can be a federal charge. And do not discuss your status with anyone other than your lawyer. This is especially important. So, certain scenarios where you might encounter immigration officers in public, you should, if you encounter them, or in case you encounter them, you should carry valid immigration documents. So this might include copies of your green card or work permit. Um, because anyone can be a public space, um, ICE can operate, but that does not mean um, your presence justifies any actions. You still have your constitutional rights to back you. And if you are stopped on the street, you do not have to answer questions or show documentation. You can invoke your right to remain silent and make sure you repeat it if you are being um, forced to talk or answer. If they're being very aggressive, you can keep invoking your right to remain silent. And you can also present a Know Your Rights card if you're not comfortable having a verbal interaction with them. You can present the card and it will show your constitutional rights and your right to remain silent. Um, to continue with a public interaction, when you're first stopped, you can ask, "Am I free to go?" And if um, they say yes, you can calmly walk away. This is important. Um, like I mentioned, you don't want to run or move suddenly because that can draw suspicion. If they say you cannot leave, you're able to ask why you're being stopped. If you're being charged with a crime, some, such as that. And during those encounters where you're being stopped, to reiterate, you have the right to remain silent. You have the right to refuse signing documents, especially without the presence of an attorney, and you have the right to speak with a lawyer. In case ICE shows up at your home, do not open the door even a little bit. Just having it open a crack welcomes or is an indication that you're giving them consent to enter. Um, for your legal rights, you can request a judicial warrant is shown. Without a warrant, you're able to refuse entry. And um, what you can do is have them hold it up to the window or slide it underneath the door. This way, you're not opening up your home at all. And I guess to go back, you also have to make sure the warrant has valid information on it. So they can't just show any warrant. It has to be up to date. It has to show specific names of people um, they're there for, and it has to be actually signed by a federal judge. And in cases where they're using excessive force and they're trying to forcibly enter your home, make sure you take photos and videos. And if you can, write down their badge numbers and license plate numbers. Um, one second. I do see the chat. Okay. If forced entry is gained, please do not resist arrest and remain silent, and do not sign any documents without legal consult. So there are two types of warrants that are very common in these cases. So the one on the left is the administrative warrant, um, which ICE is signed by ICE, and that is not a valid warrant for them to gain entry into a private space. And then the judicial warrant, which is signed by a federal judge, which does grant them entry if it has the right information and is up to date. So an administrative or ICE warrant does not require you to allow ICE to enter non-public areas, and these orders are intended to authorize ICE agents to detain people suspected of breaking immigration laws, so not related to criminal charges. And these orders are signed by an immigration officer and not by a judge. As you can see, the details of the warrant, they would be related to removal or deportation, and as you can see, signed by an ICE official. So this is not give authorization for them to enter, whereas a judicial warrant is signed by a judge and does allow ICE and law enforcement to enter non-public areas, search certain spaces which will be clearly identified, and take certain items or arrest a specific person named on the warrant. And that's also important to remember because if they have the wrong address or wrong name, you can still deny them entry. And if it's out of date, you also can deny entry, even if they have a judicial warrant. So you want to make sure it has the right name, it has the correct address, make sure the reason for issuing it is on there, a valid date, and a judge's signature. In case you're stopped while driving or in your car, first you can check if the officer is from uh, local police or immigration, so you can ask them to identify themselves. Um, and without opening your window or doors, you can request to see a judicial warrant and have them put it up to the window and uh, ensure you're exercising the right to remain silent. So you can say, I wish to remain silent, and, and you do not have to provide or sign any documents prior to speaking to a lawyer. And this is in the case of immigration officials. Interactions with police, you would want to comply a bit more because they can arrest you without any suspicion. Um, if ICE comes to your workplace, since they're often private spaces, they cannot enter without a signed judicial warrant, which I just covered, and making sure you inspect the warrant that has accurate and up-to-date information. And you're able to deny um, agents entry if the warrant is not valid or they do not present it. And a good practice is to have a primary contact at the workplace ask ICE what the purpose of their visit is and be prepared to contact attorneys that you're connected to and call the ICER hotline as soon as you have a confirmed ICE sighting at your workplace. So this would be the worst case scenario in case you're arrested by ICE. Something you can do to protect yourself and make sure that any loved ones can contact you is to memorize key numbers. So your ID number, such as your green card number, your arrest number, or your jail ID. And the arrest numbers and jail IDs are typically on wristbands that are given to you. And something that might be more readily available is memorizing phone numbers. So anyone you would want to contact, including friends and family and legal representation, because you will most likely have your cell phone confiscated, so they won't be able to contact your cell phone and you won't have access to your contact list. So if you're able to memorize a crucial number, you'll be able to make a phone call to them, letting them know where you are and exactly the circumstances of your arrest, and hopefully be able to be released shortly afterwards. So when you're arrested, it's important to keep invoking your rights. So asking to speak to a lawyer, making sure you do not lie. So in the case you're not comfortable with anything, you have the right to remain silent and should invoke that. You should definitely not falsely claim to be a US citizen because you can be punished for that. Um, and you're not required to sign any documents, especially without the presence of a lawyer. And as mentioned, do not discuss your immigration status with anyone except your lawyer. There really isn't any positive to sharing that with anyone that you're detained with. Um, so something that is important right now because we've seen ICE and Border Patrol really escalate their interactions is to record them if they're breaking any laws or violating anyone's constitutional rights. So you do have the right to film or photograph all law enforcement officers that are in public spaces and or on your property from a safe distance away. Typically, what's recommended is a few feet. Um, and law enforcement cannot confiscate or view your footage or photos without a search warrant. And if your phone is locked, then that's enough for them to need a warrant. Um, so make sure to record, or if you don't have access to a phone, write down when and where it's occurring, agent information, what uniforms they're wearing, if they have any weapons, vehicle details, such as the make and model of the car, license plate number, the state of the license plate, if they have any tinted windows, um, any property that was taken or damaged, names of those involved, especially people that are being detained. But it's important to get their consent first before recording. And if there's any use of force or intimidation by immigration officers, but it's also really important not to interfere with their activity because you can be arrested as well for that. It's important not to share without consent of those detained, or to share unconfirmed activity because that can spread panic and a lot of misinformation really rapidly. So here are some sentences to memorize for any interaction or in any situation where you can invoke your rights. So when first encountering a law enforcement official, you can say, "Am I under arrest? Am I free to go?" This one is really important and comes up a lot. "I wish to exercise my right to remain silent." And in case um, you're searched initially, you can say, "I do not consent to your entry or search," especially with police. Um, you can say, "I wish to make a phone call. I want to speak with my attorney. Please show me your warrant, and I will not sign any document." Okay. And something you can do in case of an ICE arrest or detention is to make an emergency plan. This will make sure everyone in the household knows what to do. And you can also designate someone responsible for your children and property through power of attorney if you're familiar with that practice. And this is a good way to make sure all your critical documents are in a secure place and you know where they are at all times. Um, you're able to memorize key contact phone numbers and have them written in case you need other family members to access them. And you can guide family or other emergency contacts on how to find ICE detainees through the uh, ICE detainee locator. And in case of people with children, you can consider temporary legal guardianship for children under 18. Okay, so important information to collect for your emergency plan is your name, your address, your place and date of birth. If you work, your workplace name and address, either your work or mobile phone number, um, your medical records, any allergies, vaccinations you've had, any medications you take, and your primary care physician's name or any doctors you see, name and address and office address. Documents that are important to include in your emergency plan are birth certificates, your social security card, passports, driver's license, and state IDs, and making sure they're a copy, not the original copy, in case they're confiscated. And you can also prepare deeds or mortgages, vehicle titles and registration, tax information, insurance policies, bank accounts, credit cards, any retirement and investment accounts, and power of attorney. I do see a question in the chat. We'll address it during the Q&A at the end. And this is something that you can share with any emergency context, the ICE detainee locator, which ironically is on the ICE website. So, two ways to search someone who has been arrested and is under ICE custody is by using their arrest number and country of birth, or it might be easier to use their name and country of birth so you can find out where they are. And then you can also download the Know Your Rights app if you don't have physical Know Your Rights cards. If you want to take a moment to scan the QR code, or at the end, we'll share some resources. But this way, it will have like Know Your Rights information in multiple languages and is easily accessible because um, it's on your phone. And it's really important to utilize the ICER Family Support Network hotline, which is 1-855 435 7693. And there's a bunch of different options. So right now it's mainly being used to report ICE activity. And you can also get support on deportation defense. If you need legal counsel, they can connect you to attorneys and also connect you to social services. Okay, so that's the end of my presentation. We'll leave questions for the end. Thank
All
you.
right. Thank you so much, Dylan, for sharing that information with us. Up next, we have Ken Willer from North Suburban Legal Aid. Yes, thank
Thank,
you.
thank you, Tracy. Thank you, Dylan. That was a great presentation. I will put up my slides. Okay, so hopefully, so hopefully we can see this. My name is Ken Willer. I'm a supervising attorney with the North Suburban Legal Aid Clinic. We are located in Highland Park, Illinois. We have three practice areas really quickly. Just wanted to mention, obviously immigration, but we also have attorneys who work to help domestic violence survivors and those in housing. So for domestic violence, we do help those seeking orders of protection, divorce, and child custody. For our housing staff helps tenants with any issues with landlord-tenant issues, evictions, lockouts. But tonight, of course, we'll be talking mostly about immigration. Our legal practice helps with family-based immigration, which is usually the most um, common area of immigration. For certain types of familial relationships, if one person is a U.S. citizen or a green card holder, they may be able to apply or petition for another family member. That's not always the case. There are a lot of ifs in that statement, so it's not always simply a matter of having a qualifying relative, but that is one area of immigration that is very common. We do removal defense, which is deportation. We do help people become with the step of citizenship. Green card renewals. U visas are for people who are victims of certain violent crimes in the US. They may be able to get immigration relief based on being a victim in the US. Asylum, which is in the news a lot lately. Those asylum is for people who have a reasonable fear of returning to their country based on certain um, persecutions. DACA, as Dylan also mentioned, and VAWA. I wanted to mention, immigration, I think, as we all know, is really like a federal practice. There's nothing really much at the state level. These are the agencies that we really deal with. As we kind of know, U.S. Department of Homeland Security has been in the news a lot with ICE in our area. But there are many other agencies. USCIS, the second one there is the most common that we deal with. They handle most applications that are filed in the U.S. I did want to mention very briefly that the Executive Office of Immigration Review, that's the fancy term for immigration court. Um, that's important to note that that is also an executive agency. It's not an Article 3 court that most federal courts are, and that means that it does not follow the constitutional requirements that other federal courts do. So certain rules of civil procedure, certain other areas are not other protections don't exist in immigration court as they would in federal court. Um, and that, of course, means also that these immigration court changes a lot as does the presidential administrations with the presidential administrations. Dylan did a great job of explaining, what our rights are. If you encounter ICE in public, at work, or at home, or at a home. I just wanted to quickly mention again, work. I like to think of the work scenario as kind of like a restaurant. There are private areas and public areas, right? At a restaurant, like obviously anyone can walk into a restaurant, but it would be a little awkward if somebody walked into the kitchen at a restaurant, right? So I bring that up because obviously we don't all work at restaurants, but many workplaces have areas that are open to the public, and then they have areas that are only for staff only. This is important because you may want to consider um, differentiating that and highlighting that. So just because you have that kitchen-like area, you might want to put a sign that says staff only, right? Because then we're clearly delineating that not anybody can just walk into every area of our office or workplace. If you work in HR or you are the person who does employee matters, um, ICE does not have to request the I-9s without prior notice, but please also have those I-9s available and ready and know where they are. I'm going to repeat, I don't want to repeat a lot of what Dylan said, but please, of course, never lie. Lying to law enforcement is very often a crime. I'm not going to repeat everything here either. But again, the home is the area with the most protections. And prior to this year, typically ICE, if they did come to a house, um, they would, they would knock on the door and they would usually have an actual warrant. So, please don't think that this is an academic exercise tonight that we're talking about. It is true that, usually ICE understands these things when it comes to moving into houses that they do need a judicial warrant to actually come into a house. But of course, don't open the door because once that door is opened, then anyone can come in. I think we always get questions about, okay, maybe I'm not an immigrant, but what can I do? I'm concerned. I want to help out. I think the first thing is record. If you suspect that there's immigration enforcement in the area, record. For many reasons, like Dylan said, the main thing is tamping down on rumors. Rumors spread like wildfire, especially in the immigrant community, but nowadays with everybody. And it's okay to say like, oh, I wasn't sure if this is ICE, but like, you know, let me just record and say, but don't say, oh my God, ICE is here for sure. That's we don't want to spread more fear in the community than is already occurring. Um, and as Dylan said, you can record as much information as possible. So even if you're just a bystander looking on, right after everybody leaves, write down everything you saw because you're gonna possibly change the facts around once you start thinking about it. And these facts are important for people who are detained. Um, there is litigation going on right now about arrests that have happened without warrants and without probable cause. And if these are recorded and there are witnesses who are reliable, that can be very useful to the people who are detained. It can help them get out of detention in some cases. So it can be very, very useful. As I mentioned, if you're in the workplace, employee only signs, consider using those. Have a safety plan for work and for school. And I know it'll be on another slide, but like have that have one person in charge of this, but make sure that there's a second backup person because the day that something happens is always that day that that person is out because they're out sick or something, right? So we always want to make sure we have at least two people who are in charge of everything. Um, at schools, but also at work, we also recommend don't bring up someone else's immigration status, even if you're close with them, because immigration is never black and white. It's never I am undocumented, I have status. There are a lot of complicated situations, um, and there are a lot of legally, and then of course when it relates to family and friends, it's very emotionally charged, right? So we don't want to add stress to anybody by asking right out, what is your immigration status? As I mentioned, always have two people when you're safe for your safety protocol. Have your list of phone numbers of what to do. If you have a reception area, make sure that, or front-facing area, make sure that the people who work in the front-facing area know what to do if and when they suspect that immigration enforcement is around. Especially when it comes to like the warrants. Again, it's easy to talk about warrants and what they look like when we're all calm and relaxed, but when that day comes, it's a lot helpful to have maybe that copy of that slide at the desk so people understand. Okay, I should look for that the address is correct, that the date is correct, and that it's signed by a judge. Okay, I can do that. That helps also relieve a little bit of anxiety too about this, right? Like we have a procedure, we have steps to follow. That's a lot better than everybody worrying about what happens. And for people who are non-citizens, like Dylan said, make sure you know your A number, make sure your family and friends know your A number. That is usually the first thing that will help you locate where this detained person is in the case they are detained. Um, Make sure you have your medications. That's a big one. If you are in medical treatment, make sure you have evidence of that too, so that if you are detained, ICE will have to make sure that you get the proper treatment, or possibly in some cases even release you so that you can continue to go to your treatment. Um, have all your important documents like passports, IDs, civil documents like marriage, birth certificates, all in one place and make sure someone else knows about it too, so that you don't have to fight to call and say, oh, hey, please go into this area and find this stuff. Make sure everybody can get that right away. Um, and talk about this with your family as well, so that again, everybody is on the same page. One thing that we have found to be very useful, both practically and in terms of again, lowering some anxiety, is something called a short-term guardianship. This is essentially a document that is very easy to execute. And it is a letter that says, I, as a parent, nominate this person that I am appointing to take care of my child in the event that I'm incapacitated. And in this case, incapacitated would be if I'm detained by immigration, if I am deported. And what this does is it allows for 1 year of care. under this guardianship letter so that that guardian can take your child to school, they can take them to the doctor, whatever needs to be done without having to worry in those first few scary days, what's happening to my children. They don't need to go, you don't need to go to court for this. You don't need a judge to sign off. You don't even need to file it with any agency. You really just need to have a good copy of it with the guardian and ideally with you too. And again, that's clearly not permanent, but it is something that can be very useful. It's one less thing to stress about in the event of a detention. We always recommend that this guardian that you appoint be at least 18 years old and be honestly a US citizen. We used to recommend green card holders as well, but in this environment, a US citizen, is ideal. And then again, if you are an immigrant, we always recommend getting a legal review every few years, if not sooner. The law does occasionally change as well as personal circumstances. So it's always important to see if things have changed since the last time you spoke with an attorney. There are plenty of legal aid agencies in the Chicago area that do not charge. So it's not always, it's always possible to get free, at least free legal advice. As we mentioned earlier, if you're a victim of a violent crime in the US, that may be a pathway forward for a visa and eventually a green card. Asylum is another option for some people who recently entered the US. For children who have been abandoned, abused, or neglected by one parent, they also may qualify for immigration relief. Victims of trafficking or domestic violence also may have pathways. And then lastly, again, family-based immigration is also often an option. Very quickly, there has been a lot of changes to immigration policy, not necessarily law, but policy in the last year. Temporary protected status is one program that helped many people from countries where there is war or natural disaster. So, for example, Ukraine, Venezuela had temporary protected status. The Trump administration has been attempting to rescind or stop renewals of those TPS grants. I would just say stay tuned for those because they often go in and out of litigation. So it is always hard to say whether someone can reapply or not. Let's see. I'm not going to mention all of these. I want to save a lot of time for questions. But I'll say, the sensitive locations memo has been rescinded. What that was a memo from immigration. It was actually from Tom Homan from the first Trump administration, saying that ICE will not enter certain locations like schools, hospitals. They will not arrest people at political protests or religious ceremonies. But that has been rescinded. So there is no specific areas that ICE has promised not to go to anymore. There's been a big effort to rescind funding for US refugees. Refugees are essentially asylees who ask for protection from the US while they're still outside the US. And so, again, in case somebody is being persecuted outside the US, they can ask for help. And there used to be an office that would help resettle people here. That funding has been trying to be cut off. And the criteria for becoming a citizen is also trying to be expanded. So they're trying to ask immigration to look at other areas of good moral character, which they already had been doing for people who apply to become citizens. And last but not least, actually, expedited removal. That is essentially the idea that if somebody is detained by ICE, they're determined not to have status and they are determined to be removable. If they've entered within the last 2 years, they may not be able to speak to a judge before they're removed. The Trump administration has also now enacted a law from the World War II era that requires every non-citizen to what they call register with the US. That doesn't mean that every person has to actively do this. There are many exceptions, but that is going to be used, we assume, for another reason to deny immigration benefits in the future if somebody did not register this year with immigration as a non-citizen. And again, that's also probably going through the courts, so nothing is ever super clear on these. There is a travel ban for certain countries. Yet again, it hasn't been in the news much this time around, but the Trump administration used kind of their formula from the first time around that worked with the courts. So if there are certain countries, and if somebody is a citizen from those countries, there can be very severe consequences, even if they were granted visas already or legal status in the U.S. already. It can be very difficult for them to continue with U.S. immigration here. Again, if you're in that situation, highly recommend speaking to an attorney, an immigration attorney, before making choices. And again, we'll see what comes of this. In the Chicago area, I think we all know that the last 2 months there's been a huge surge of immigration enforcement. Um, the Big Beautiful Act provisioned, I think, as much money to ICE as the U.S. Marine Corps. So they have a lot of money to hire and to conduct whatever they want to do. ICE has been in every level of courts in the area: immigration court, criminal court, family relations court. And as we know, they've been through many of our communities in the north and northwest suburbs. And we do have knowledge that they've been detaining U.S. citizens at times as well. And it is very important, again, that, if somebody is detained, that we try to reach out to their family and friends so that we can contact them as soon as possible, find out where they are. Part of that reason is because when someone is detained in this area, they go to Broadview, but Broadview is small, and Illinois does not allow for any other, they do not allow for contracts with federal immigration. So typically, a person detained for immigration in Chicago is only in Broadview for less than 24 hours. They're removed to other states. So it could be Indiana, Wisconsin, Kentucky, Louisiana, or Texas. That's what we've seen a lot of. And so that's why it's very important to know, for federal court actions, if there are any, where this person is for jurisdictional reasons. And we've seen, there are lawsuits, of course. It's very, very topical, very fast-paced moving with what's going on at Broadview. Let's see. Like I said, temporary protected status. I'm going through this real quick. I do want to leave a lot of time for questions. In the Chicago area, I want to mention too, there is a consent decree that applies to all law enforcement of every level. It explicitly does not allow for arrests based on race, essentially on race. It also does not allow for arrests that are effectuated without probable cause or a warrant. So again, if we have evidence and can document arrests like that, that can help either release somebody or find some sort of legal options for that person. So it is very important. Let's see. ICE has been targeting unaccompanied minors. That's, again, been a big change to their policy. Before this year, we would always, these presentations would usually be about how ICE prioritized their removal list, right? So they really did work on people who had, they would search for people who had criminal convictions or had strong, ties to international gangs, and things like that. But now, of course, that's not really the case. So that has been a change in their priorities. Let's see. I wanted to mention too, good moral character for naturalization cases. That's a very changing, very evolving situation. Is that now for becoming a citizen, those rules are changing, like what immigration can look at and how they can determine whether you should be granted citizenship. Fees. Fees have gone up even in the previous administration for most applications with immigration. But for example, asylum was usually free, at least the application for asylum. And now, there's a $100 annual fee for asylum. Asylum cases sometimes are pending for 7, 10 years. because of the backlog. So that, of course, is imposing a huge financial burden on people who recently arrived to the US. And as we probably know in the news, again, there's been a lot of litigation over ICE who should be wearing their badges clearly and should be wearing body cameras, should not be throwing tear gas into crowds without without reason. But again, this is why documenting is very important for everybody if they're in the area. And counties such as Cook County are now declaring their public spaces, not available to federal immigration authorities. Real quickly, I just want to end with, Illinois law is still very immigrant friendly. There are many. The main one here I do want to mention is the Trust Act. It was signed into law by Governor Rauner. It essentially prohibits municipal local law enforcement from talking or communicating with federal immigration authorities about who they're looking into, who they have detained. There are exceptions to this. If somebody committed a very serious crime, they can talk with immigration authorities. But the idea is that if somebody is coming to report a crime or if they have minor traffic issues, they should not be worried. Immigrants should not be worried to talk and interact with the local police for fear of immigration issues. Um, Students in Illinois do have options as well, regardless of immigration status. And driver's licenses are also a big one. Many immigrants find it very difficult in the past to get driver's licenses and therefore uh, are receive driving without license tickets. In Illinois, you can now get a driver's license without proving immigration status, and that means, again, no driving without license, no driving without insurance. You can get insurance now. So again, Illinois, for the most part, is trying to help immigrants. And also the Voices Act for U visas. Again, U visas are for victims of violent crimes. In Illinois, this law essentially requires law enforcement to help with U visas, at least answer U visa requests. U visas require law enforcement to as part of their application. So Illinois requires that law enforcement agencies respond to these requests. Beware, there are unfortunately a lot of unlicensed, like notarios often, who will help people with immigration, and they often will end up doing a lot more harm than help for many reasons. But one, they're not licensed to speak on behalf of their clients, and two, they may not have any formal training. Many people go to notarios because they will help them file what they can technically file. But again, an attorney may realize that, okay, we can file this today, but it's not a good reason for, not a good option. I wouldn't recommend it because you may not be successful or for many other reasons. And that's why we strongly recommend please go to any agency or law firm that has experienced immigration attorneys or at least DOJ accredited representatives. Criminal histories, I do want to strongly recommend too. If somebody does have a criminal history, please always be upfront about that with your attorney and especially with immigration. Trying to get those filings expunged does not necessarily satisfy immigration. We don't recommend it in most cases. So again, whether you were stopped by the police 20 years ago or you have a lengthy criminal record, always be upfront about that with your attorney and with immigration. And pay attention to trusted news sources. As we know, there's a lot of things moving very quickly and a lot of rumors going around. So with that, again, thank you for your time. I'm going to open it up to both. Oh, shoot. I have to stop sharing my screen, but we can open up for Dylan and I to handle some questions.
Okay, great. Thank you, Ken, for that information and also for allowing time for questions. A number of questions have come in through the chat, and we have those that were submitted in advance. So that the recording can pick up on it, I'm going to read through questions one by one and give you all a chance to respond to them. So coming from the chat, do you recommend bystanders blowing whistles continually during an ICE detainment?
I can answer that. I would say that depends on your level of risk, whether you even want to be nearby. If you're low risk, yes, I do recommend that. If you've seen the whistle code, there's two patterns that you can use that will notify people in the area, and it's becoming more widespread, so people know that it's an indication that there's ICE activity or an active detention. Um, so yes, it definitely helps get the word out on the ground.
Okay, thank you for sharing and thank you for differentiating our risk tolerance. Follow-up question to that. Where can we get whistles?
I would say something that's very easily accessible is like a sporting goods store. You can also connect with any local rapid response teams. Depending on where you are, the local elected officials office might have them, depending on how seriously, they're involved. But yeah, there's different avenues, and I know some people are also 3D printing them if you know the pattern for that, and if you have the materials. And some libraries also offer 3D printing,
Thank
so
you.
there's lots of
Great, thanks. New question from the chat. Is there anything individuals with inactive or retired law licenses can specifically assist with?
I'll handle that one. I believe there are pro bono opportunities. I don't I'm not very well versed on what the ARDC statuses are and what they allow, what they don't allow. But I believe in the past we have worked with retired attorneys who have worked as pro bonos either on offsite clinics or one-off cases. So I just recommend reaching out to agencies like ours if you're interested and see if you can help out there. That's a good question. Thank you.
Thank you. Next question. What recommendations do you have for asylum seekers who have authorized work permits and social security numbers in good standing?
Sorry, I'll answer this one as well. So I can't give specific legal advice. Every case is different. I'm going to assume that the case was already correctly filed in the right jurisdiction, whether it be the correct court or with USCIS, depending on where you are. Um, but otherwise, I would say the first thing is try to obtain legal representation if you can. People that have it's you have the right to representation, as Dylan said, but you don't have the government will not provide it for you. So many people go without representation, and the rates of success are much lower, honestly, for those who don't have it. I understand it's very difficult to get for many reasons. There aren't many immigration attorneys compared to the number of cases. So first, try to get legal representation. Second, continue to make sure that your court date, if you have one, is still on. Those can change continuously. Um, and third, if you can, work on your case if you still have time. You can always amend your case after you file it, work on getting more evidence and making it stronger.
All right. Thank you for that very thorough response. Dylan, I've got a question for you. What can I do as a community member if I witness a violation of immigrants' rights during an ICE raid? What steps should be followed and who should I report to?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think you should definitely assess if you're safe and you're able to document and record. If it's like an active, hot, situation where like there's a lot of things going on, it might be better to just wait and see if you can like step away or until the situation de-escalates. But you can record and document that, and you should absolutely report to the ICER hotline. And if you're connected to any rapid response teams that are local, to share the activity there as well.
Okay, thank you. Um, Next question. Should immigrants with pending status and USCIS appointments and no criminal record also carry their original documentation at all times? Or is a copy or photo of their documents sufficient? What safety measures do you recommend?
I'll take a stab at this. So, I mean, technically, as we know, there's no requirement for many people to not carry, there's no requirement to carry certain documents. I do say there are exceptions. People that have green cards should carry their green cards on them regardless of how comfortable they feel. Um, I think it's kind of like it's a question of how comfortable are you carrying your only original documents. If for example, if you're an asylum seeker and you have your original passport, I probably wouldn't recommend carrying that original passport. I would have a very good copy of it, because if you lose that, you probably can't ask your local consulate to get you a new one. So it's a personal choice. I think it depends on how comfortable you are carrying originals. Um, but at the very least, absolutely have very clear photos, scans, especially of your approval notices, your receipt notices. And if you have work authorization, absolutely carry that because that's essentially a photo ID. In most cases, I would expect that to be sufficient, but again, in this environment, it's hard to say.
Thank you. Dylan, I think I've got another question for you. What rights do mixed status families have, and how can they prepare safety plans?
So, like I mentioned, everyone in the US has the same constitutional rights, so all the rights would apply to every family member, regardless of immigration status. So there's a level of protection there. I would say to delegate some responsibilities if there are citizens, typically they're children, um, so making sure that they know um, any documentation or information about their family members in case that they do need to like step up. But yeah, a good practice would be to have those who have either uh, green cards or citizenship to like be the main points of contact and to handle the safety plan because they'll likely be protected in case another family member gets detained or is arrested.
Thank you. Next question. If someone has a pending case, what actions might jeopardize their immigration process?
That's a pretty open-ended question. I think obviously the first easy one would be criminal issues, right? So it really depends on what your pending case is. Some statuses allow for, it does not harm your case per se if you get arrested for minor crimes. Other cases, it is important to mention. Well, I'll say this. It's important to mention no matter what. Most applications and most interviews with immigration are going to ask, have you been charged with a crime? Have you been convicted? Have you been stopped or detained by police? And you always want to be completely honest because if you say, no, I don't think I was really detained, and immigration says, well, we have this record you were arrested for just for a night, then you've committed fraud and misrepresentation in their minds, and that can deny you from a lot of things. So criminal issues, absolutely. Speak with both your criminal attorney and an immigration attorney if it comes to that, because they may have conflicting viewpoints or objectives. Um, Other than that, of course, do not leave the country unless you've discussed this with an attorney and you have prior authorization. And even then, you still should consider that. Frankly, just don't leave the country. Um, and yeah, I think is what I say. I think it depends on your specific circumstance.
Okay, understood. Thank you. Couple more questions here. How can employers support immigrant employees and ensure a safe work environment?
I'll speak real briefly. I think maybe Dylan might have a better answer. It is tough. It's quite frankly tough. On the legal side, frankly, there's not much other than trying to foster a safe environment and trying your best to anticipate the worst so that everybody is on the same page and everybody has lowered anxiety over this. Um, Having all your documentation correct and in the same place, especially those I-9s. And as an employer, you probably want to be scared about that because I-9 penalties are very severe. So those could sink your entire business. So you definitely want to make sure that's right. Dylan, I'm not sure if you have other opinions.
Hmm. Yeah, on the topic of I-9s, so immigration would have to give you 3 days notice that they do want to check I-9. So in case that they don't, you're allowed to deny them entry. So I want to make sure that's clear. Just because they say, oh yeah, we want to like look at your I-9s, you absolutely don't have to um, allow them entry. And a good practice is to have like staff train employees on their rights and anything related to Meeker Watch. So attending ICER trainings is super helpful. They occur every week. So if you want information about that, you can go on ICER's website. Definitely being knowledgeable of Know Your Rights and just having similar to the family safety plan, workplace safety plan. So highlighting the staff personnel that would be involved and um, identifying private spaces versus public spaces and having the correct signage to indicate what spaces are not um, public. And yeah, those would just be some basic things that you.
Okay, great. Thank you. I think we've got time for maybe two more questions, including one that just came through in the chat. How do we find information for local rapid response teams? Is there one in Arlington Heights?
Yeah, so unfortunately, I don't have a direct contact since I'm based in Chicago. But if you do go through ICER, that's how all the local rapid response teams are being organized. So Illinois Coalition for Immigrant and Refugee Rights, if you go on their website, they have a page for getting involved where you can join trainings. And typically during those trainings, they'll have information on rapid response where you can, share your interest. And I do want to let folks know there is an onboarding process where people get vetted and they're getting an overwhelming amount of people trying to sign up. So please be patient. And in the meantime, if you want to connect with any community members, you're also able to do so independently, but trying to make sure efforts aren't overlapping with ones that are being.
All right, thank you, Dylan. And last question here. What else can allies do to support those in the community who need help?
I'll just speak super quick. I just have one point, and it's not a great point, but it is something interesting. Um, Talk about it, like bring this up, and especially to people, like especially Thanksgiving's next week. People outside the Chicago area, they don't really know what's going on, and it is important to bring this up. It doesn't have to be political. Like my position's not political. I don't break the law. I hope people follow the law. This is just what's going on. These are just the facts. And not a lot of people read the news. It's just something that I think this year has been very different in the last 10 years I've been an immigration attorney. And I think it's just something that people should know, in my opinion, my humble opinion.
Oh, Tracy, you want to go ahead? Well, I am glad someone brought up rapid response because that is something you can directly do on the ground. It does take, some time to get onboarded, but you can also just talk to your neighbors, see what any community members if are needed or what they need if you're not immediately impacted, supporting, local businesses and yeah, just trying to stay knowledgeable about what's happening locally if there's any actions that are being put together by organizations such as ICER or OCAD or other community organizations. Um, and yeah, just being able to share like any strategies that people are.
Okay, that's good to hear. All right, so thank you so much to our panelists, as well as those of you at home in the audience. We really appreciate the time that you've spent with us this evening. As a reminder, this is recorded, and so it'll soon be available on the library's YouTube channel. So thank you so much. Have a good night.